The time has come once again to speak as witches and wizards do. I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to season 2, episode 9, Love Part 2. The other one was so good, we're making another version of it, another extension to it. And as we were just discussing, Michaela gave me the assignment last week instead of everyone else the assignment. And so the assignment was learning to let go of control. And relating to love, this is the big one that I think a lot of people will want to hear. So I discussed the idea that when someone passes, especially when you still have contact with them, when you can still contact with them, you should never move on with your love. But the thing is, when I started doing the assignment for letting go, the big thing, and I knew, because wizard and all, you kind of, even if your emotions aren't with you, you still intellectually can grasp the concept, was all the work I did with my twin flame was to teach me the love, the patience, as well as the spiritual techniques to move love on into the world. But the idea is to be able to do it, I had to no longer let it be tethered to my twin flame. I had to let it go in that perspective. So at some point during the week, while I was doing the letting things go exercise, it hit me. It's the, like I said, I knew intellectually, but the emotional perspective of, okay, she's not even in the identity of your twin flame anymore. So it doesn't have the same impact on her if I moved forward anyways. So I'm holding on to an identity that doesn't even exist anymore. And I'm letting it pull me back from doing what I needed to do and I knew I needed to do. So in the learning to let go, I let go of it. I did the whole thing of you thank everyone, you thank the spirits that worked with you, you thank the person who worked with you, and then you take the lesson you learned and you move forward with it. So that was my big take from the assignment. I actually let go enough so that now going into the future, I'll be a better teacher. I'll be better at relationships. I'll, yeah, to
The
be
power,
egotistical, make the world a better place.
the power of following through on an assignment. Like
Yeah.
that's amazing and way to show up for yourself and for your future students and even your current students. Like that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I love it when things shift and new understandings come into play. I was going to say new reality, but it's not that because that's, it's all a hologram anyway. But new understanding, new layers,
Yes.
there's lots and lots of curtains that cover these layers, and every time something gets pulled back or simply becomes see-through, then you can step forward, you can move forward, and
Mm-hmm.
that's wonderful. So
Well,
yay
that's,
you.
yeah. Woo-hoo. As I would tell people to do, woohoo. You can't see it,
Yeah,
but my arms are up
absolutely.
cheering.
Woot.
And for those of you who are in the know about these things, and some of you are, when you do that action, it brings all the dopamines, all the adrenaline stuff, and it rewards you for celebrating what you did. And I think I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but I turned a 10-minute walk I didn't want to do into a 2-hour walk I was glad I did. By
There you
just
go.
every time I hit a plateau, I just woohooed. And then I was like, oh, I've got more energy. Okay, I'll continue.
Now, in
So,
case you're listening to this and you can't see it because
yeah.
Danielle hasn't put the video up yet, that was a victory pose, arms
Mhm.
up and celebrating. So, and that's a good one to do. Before you get on a call with
Mhm.
someone, before you have a phone call that you're nervous about, anything like that. I mean, I had a presentation to do last week that I won't go into details of, but it was in front of somebody significant.
Hmm.
and I was the first person to do it. So before I went on to do my presentation, I played the song Because I'm Happy
Right.
by Farrell,
Yeah.
whatever his name is. Anyway, put
Yeah.
that song on because that's an upbeat, dance around thing.
Hmm.
Did some victory poses and then went in to do my presentation. And my energy was up, and I was happy enough to be able to even put a song in the middle of that presentation, and which was unexpected by all of us, including me. And there you go. And it went over, the presentation was fine. It went well. So it shifts your energy with whatever you're going to do. So that victory pose is a great thing. Yes. And if the listener's not using that yet, okay, that's number
Yeah.
one on your agenda.
It is, and I like this about about the things we talk about because this is something really simple that anyone can add to any practice they have or anything they're doing because it's literally that simple and it speaks the world to how your body really functions or how you can motivate yourself.
Well,
And in the world,
simple.
motivation is always a big factor.
Simple is what works. If
Mm.
if if something is getting complicated, then that is, I find, a really good sign that you took the wrong path.
Mm.
And you stop, turn around, and just go for the simple thing. Sometimes we look for complication because surely it can't be that easy. But there's got to
Yeah.
be more to it than that. And we have all these stories about how things have got to be harder to achieve or they're not worth achieving. And even if that's not a conscious thought, it is a subconscious one.
Right.
If it's worthwhile, it's got to be tough, right? No, that's exactly wrong. In fact, nothing needs to be that hard. Nothing needs to be that hard unless somebody makes it hard. So simple, yes. Hands up in the air, do a dance, cheer. I had a client in her 80s who had got some depression going on. Now
Mhm.
she'd lost her son, she was living on her own. She got a lot of really good reasons to have some depression.
Right.
And first thing I got her to do to make a shift
Mm.
was when you get up in the morning, before you're even out of bed, reach over and turn some music on. Have it set up so you can turn music on. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever you like is the thing you put on. And then you get up and you move to that music.
Mhm.
Dance, again, doesn't matter what it looks like, just move. And that just got everything moving in her body more for her to have a more positive start to the day. And it's awfully hard to get through your day if you wake up sluggish and miserable and stay
Yeah.
there, right? But if you get up and dance, I used to do belly dancing,
Oh, yeah.
and I actually have a picture somewhere of that,
Mm.
but I did a performance, and it was a lot of fun. But the thing with belly dancing that's significant to know in this case is you cannot belly dance and be worried or nervous or miserable at the same time. They are incompatible. You can't move like that if your mind is full of negative
Mm.
things. So it's the same principle when you put music on and just get up and move in the morning. You're not thinking miserable things if you're moving your body to happy music.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. The mind body connection is always an interesting topic because it's not just that your brain sitting inside your skull is telling your body what to do. Your body, the things you do, your body also again returns and tells things to your brain to do.
absolutely.
And
And when it comes to sort of emotions that you feel and the thoughts that you have with those emotions, particularly when it's anxiety, for example, let's
Mhm.
go with that one. People think they're thinking anxious thoughts and then they feel this way. And it's actually exactly wrong. You feel the feeling, your body goes to that place because it's familiar and something has prompted it to do so. And then your brain says, oh, hey, we're feeling this way.
Yeah.
What can I think about that backs it up? That
Mhm.
confirmation bias, right? You get what you're focused on. And so the body says, oh, I'm so nervous. And the brain says, oh, yeah, yeah, got to find you some reasons to be
Mhm.
nervous. And it will, but it's the other way around. You get that feeling in your body first, and the body tells the brain, hey, I need something to worry about.
Mhm. Yeah,
Different perspective, right?
yeah, because I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if we discussed it on this on or after the podcast or during the podcast. But so as I've said before, I'll get an anxiety or a panic attack. But one of the things I know is the thing that triggers me, I can't do anything about. I literally can't do anything about. There's no action I can take. So all I can do is check my reaction to it. And so one of my things was the last time it happened, I asked myself, why is my reaction to this fear? If there's nothing I can do about it, and it's pretty much just, I think my trigger, I think I said before, was just existing. Like what came before, what came after, trying to encompass all of it into basically a brain that's designed for a short lifetime. Like it doesn't happen. So my questions are becoming, why does this even scare me? Like, especially as a wizard, if I believe the body I have right now is for a very specific purpose, why am I even afraid of the things outside of it when I know I can't do anything? Like
I
my
would
my
bet,
existence is designed for a certain thing.
I
So why
would
am I
bet,
even worried about things beyond it? And why is my reaction to that fear instead of like, oh my God, I can make as many mistakes as I want. There's all this time and space to not worry about, or
I would bet that your human design would explain that to you.
yeah, I would
And
imagine.
I'm betting there's a lot of influence from the spleen center and which gates you have activated in that, because that is the center of awareness, but it's awareness from fear, right?
Yeah.
It's the oldest center, and it's a fear-based place. And so depending on what you've got activated as to where that comes up, but it's yours, if I recollect correctly, is defined. So that means it's fixed and constant. It's always going to be there. What you do with it is what you can influence. So yeah, human design. This is actually where human design comes in really
Yes.
handy, because something that's a pattern, and you just like, why do I keep having this? Intellectually, I know this isn't helping, and I don't want to do it. Why is it still there? When you know why it's there and how it shows up,
Hmm.
it's something you can deal with differently. So that's my little bit for human
Uh,
design. It
I
really
was
does
gonna
make a
say,
difference.
I was gonna have to correct you on this one. My spleen is undefined.
It's undefined. Okay, but you have gates activated, right?
I do. I have two gates activated in my spleen.
Okay. So that's where your difference. So what you've got there is,
Yeah.
because it's undefined, you're going to have influence from outside that ebbs and flows, right?
Right.
And the two gates that you have activated are going to influence how that shows up for you. So it's still a significance. It's just that it's not fixed and constant. It's going to come and go.
Yeah. Well, I can
And
to
I've
back
looked
it
at a
up
bunch of
though.
charts since I've looked at yours.
Yeah.
So
To back you up, because it's gate 32 is one of them activated,
okay.
and gate 48. So, but gate 32, if I'm understanding it correctly, it understands the value of the physical world or something to that effect of the material world.
Yeah, I'd have to look
Yeah.
through to see what else you've got.
But I can exactly tell you why. I can actually tell you why that this happens, because as I've said, right, I deal with the fundamentals of things.
Mhm.
So if I ponder too long on certain fundamentals, like I can't grasp the fundamentals of eternity because it's too much to like to do the big picture to and then to look down at how it works. I have to be able to process the big picture. And with a
Right.
finite mind, it's hard to process the big picture. So that actually doesn't surprise me that I would have an issue around something that my brain can't process, because I process the big things first and then work down to see how they fit. I'm
Okay.
not surprised at it. I'm not surprised by the nature of it. I'm a little, well, actually, to be honest with you, when you have a trickster as a teacher, one of the things is to, how to put it, to take away your sense of comfort, to take away your sense of security in your environment so that you're forced to adapt and grow. But the first thing is to undermine your sense of security. So it doesn't surprise me that my trigger is things that are too big for me to see. And it doesn't necessarily surprise me that I have some kind of anxiety issues, because that was part of the impetus to grow. Now, and it's weird, right? Just to get on this, just to kind of hit this topic, when something like this happens, it's not to cripple you for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
These events that set you off balance so that you can recover your balance, but knowing what it takes to recover your balance. Like to teach what I teach, there's no like there are people who teach, right? But not everyone's going to teach it in the same way. A lot of the teaching is culturally influenced or influenced by people who came before, but things change. And if you want to use the yugas, every yuga has a different way of being, and there's a different flow of energy. So there's a different way of perceiving things or interacting with things. So we're moving from one yuga to another, but that yuga we're moving to, although it's this technically the same yuga, it's about growing now. So I have to basically put myself through the paces of growing. So I have to look at what's bad that can happen, and then figure the paths I can take to recover from it, so that when someone else needs that help, especially on this level, then I can provide it because I have an idea of what to do, or I can guide people, which I think is the word I'm looking for, rather than teach people.
Hmm. Going to challenge you on that one.
All right, give her.
Yep. Because what I'm thinking here, if you're looking forward at what can go
Mm-hmm.
wrong and what can be a problem, this is you're looking future that hasn't
Right.
happened yet, and
True.
you're looking at all the ways it could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that that's not helpful, including in what you do. For you,
Mm-hmm.
it's another control thing of letting go of knowing what could happen and
Right.
just trying, just going out there and seeing what happens rather than planning for it. Because, and you know this as well as anyone, having had a trickster
Yep.
beginning, that there's always going to be something that you have not accounted for. But what
Yes.
you've done is put your energy into a whole lot of those avenues that aren't worth your energy
Mm-hmm.
by trying to be prepared. And I don't think that's what your students need from you. And I
No.
don't think that's what you need from you. I think letting go of the need to know all the possible variations, it's still this is, we're on part two, and this is part two of your
Mm-hmm.
challenge, is to
All right.
continue the let go of the need to know what's coming or what could be coming because you cannot know that. Like you can predict all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things based on if that's a skill set that you have, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, I
The
will
better
also
is
that
to
I
be
do have the
now.
skill set. Actually, you know what I'm going to throw in here? Because
Hmm.
we have discussed the idea of your life contract.
Hmm.
So that means certain events have to occur. So, but I'm saying this so much also for the listeners, right? Because it's going to sound very contradictory when we talk about certain topics to say that you can't know the future. But if you've already planned stuff, then how would you not know what's coming? You wouldn't know necessarily as you're existing through it. But
Well,
depending on your level of flow, our understanding of flow, you might pick up what's coming.
okay, so you don't have to know what it looks like.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You know you're moving forward.
Yes.
What does forward mean? And if you're focused on these particular paths that you can see,
Mm-hmm.
there could well be one that's even better that you're missing because you're too focused on the need to know, right?
Yeah.
This is that the image that I have right now is you're in a ship and you want to get to this island for a holiday but you're busy looking at the water to see are there any things in
Mm-hmm.
the way? Like, what does the water look like? Where's the
Right.
water going? All of this. And because you're not looking at your destination, you're not focused on the
Mm-hmm.
end point, you miss the island by miles
Yeah.
because, navigation shifts a little. And so, yeah, you're kind of doing all the things, but the focus is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And the need to know how you're going to get to where you're going, how you're going to move
Mm-hmm.
forward, that can hold you up. And
Mm-hmm.
it can trip you up away from the things that are actually going to be even better. So sometimes it's that trust fall, right?
Yeah.
It's taking the step and trusting that the step will meet your foot.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come up as you step forward. And I'm pretty sure this has come up in our conversations before.
Probably.
But it really is it's hard to do, but that this is where you get to trusting that the universe, the
Mm,
spirits you're working with, all the
mm,
things that you have set up in your soul contracts and what have you,
mm.
it's working for you. So the step will be there. Just
Yeah,
got to move your foot. Just move your foot and don't worry about looking down to see where the step is.
yeah. And I'll actually back you up on this. Well, there's two things, right? For those of you who are listening to this and you wonder, like, because a lot of stuff we say, even though we do have, like, we've had a couple of episodes, and I will point out our more popular episodes are the ones where it gets really weird. They are. Here Be Dragons and the Flow Part 2 are the most popular episodes.
Okay.
So, but we do talk a lot about mundane things. So, but what I wanted to draw the attention to the listeners is to, you may have noticed by now, there's very much a reason why Michaela's my co-host. If you want to look at it from the spiritual like even from a basic perspective, but more from the spiritual perspective, because we only knew each other a week, and I've said this before, we've only known each other really a week before we jumped in as co-hosts together.
Yep.
But if you're paying attention, especially to the way the podcast flows, you'll notice that Michaela either reinforces what I say, clarifies what I say, or helps direct what I'm saying to a direction that's needed. And this is, like I've said before, a lot of what you're seeing is the bulk of our relationship developing. We do talk off or text every once in a while, but it's not the bulk of our time spent together is still really these calls. So people are
Yep.
still seeing. So it's not like we have everything super planned ahead of time. And so Michaela will know exactly what to counter or what to say. This flow of conversation is very natural, and it's very much, you could argue, the universe is the universe at play in having an influence in how things develop
I would
by putting
argue for
someone in
that.
who.
I would argue for that quite strongly because I plan nothing. I don't know what I'm going to say until my mouth says it.
Right.
And I find that that is my best way of operating. So this is a sort of verbal take that step and trust the step will be there. I mean, I've told you before, but I don't think it was on air, that I did a talk at UCLA that I arrived, I was sick.
I think you did mention it on there.
I did mention it on air.
Yeah.
Well, that was an example
Yeah.
of I arrived for this talk and I did not have a preparation. What I had was faith that it would go in the way it meant to go. And it did. And that turned out to be my most successful talk to date. Um, but it takes a willingness to sort of fall on your ass, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could have gone really badly. I wasn't so certain that it was going to work perfectly by any means. Not at all. I was just prepared to try. And that's, I figured to myself, it'll go and it'll either be good or it won't. And either way, that's fine. And that's the key is to be either way, that's fine, however it goes. So letting go of that need to see all these paths and figure out how you're going to deal with them, that is a lot of energy. And I invite you to pull your energy back to now and trust that you'll be able to handle that stuff when it comes up.
And
Because you have a lifetime of experience where you can do this. You've done it.
mhm. And it's interesting because if you want to see that pattern, right? Because if you look at the beginning of the podcast, the beginning episodes were highly scripted, and I've said to Michaela before, a 15-minute episode took me 4 hours to record because of how edited and how much I would go back and do the same lines over and over again to make sure it at least sounded good. And you can see by the end of the first season where the episodes are longer, but you can hear the stammering, the hums, the haws, the so probably also a mercy from the universe to the listener. Michaela's on the podcast because my attempts at free of doing it without scripting it, it's needed some work.
And most of that work is trust, right? Just
Yeah.
trust that you're going to know what to say when you need to say it, and that will work. It's when we get up in our own heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
We leave the spiritual world behind. We leave all the unseen behind, if you will,
Yeah.
and get into the thought patterns of, well, what if I'm not good enough? What if I forget this? Oh no, I have to remember that. Oh, but what if they don't like this bit? And what if they think I mean that instead of this? And we get into all of this stuff, and it's like sticky treacle. It's just you're not going to move forward from that. And it's wildly unhelpful because nothing productive can come from it. You're not going to get an answer. There's a lot more what ifs in this universe than there ever is going to be answers. The what if is an endless loop. And if you find yourself stuck in a what if loop, then the only thing to do with that really and truly is to step out of it and say, so what? And just change that so that you can break that endless loop because there is no end to the what ifs.
Yeah.
Literally, that is a definition of infinity right there. What if?
Mhm. Yeah. And it's funny because it's showing up in my classes because even my student will say, you know what? If the spirits have nothing to say, just let it go.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm finding is it's kind of, you know how I jokingly say, oh, these episodes are for Michaela because they're favoring her. It happens that way in the class I'm teaching right now. Oh, it's not for me to say anything. It's for my student to say the things she understands from what we're learning. So then I have to sit back and say nothing and just let her go. And
And
even if it's not
sometimes
exactly on point of what I wanted to do that class, it doesn't matter because all my job is to get her out of her way. So,
I think, ebb and flow with
mm,
that kind of thing is when you know you're really in flow,
mm,
right? It's like I'm not attached to having to say my piece, and
right.
I'm not attached to not saying anything.
Mm,
If something's coming to me to say, then I say it. Otherwise, I can sit quietly for however long I need to sit quietly for. That I
yeah.
can do it, and it's not a problem. It's just again, it's the attachment to what does that look like and
Mm,
how much do I have to say and how much does this person have to say and who is where on, particularly when it comes to teacher and student,
mm.
like who is the teacher and who is the student? Well, the answer is yes,
Yes. I've
right?
actually brought that up as a point in my class because
You
there's a
both
few
are.
times where something brilliant comes up and I write it down. I go, oh, thanks for teaching me this.
Huh? Yeah, no, the best teacher learns from their student. I feel
Mm,
really confident about
I agree
that.
on that too.
Because the student is often going to surpass the teacher. If you've done your job right,
Yes.
they should be taking off and running with it and doing amazing things. So it's like what comes to mind now is parenting. If you are a
Yes.
parent and you're parenting your kids right, they are going to succeed in life way better than you have, and not in the way that you would like to have done. And that piece is
Yeah.
really important. Your agenda is not important. In fact, the important thing about your agenda is that you go stuff it in the drawer, close the drawer, and put a padlock on it. Because your agenda is not your kid's life, it's not your kid's agenda. But if you're parenting them in a productive way, then they will be able to forge their own path, and their path will be brighter than yours because that's what we do. That's the role. And if your child is held back in some way, then maybe there's something you can do to still light that spark and
Mhm.
let them go and discover what they're here to do. But that's the thing with teachers and students. It's like, no, the ideal is for the student to do the teaching. Like that's the best
Yes.
bit.
Yes. I always agree. The student should surpass the teacher
Yeah,
at every given opportunity. They should be able to move ahead of you. And then you as the teacher can learn from the student in return. It's
exactly.
yeah.
That is 100%. And so when people, and this is not you, I'm not
Mm,
saying you, but when people get stuck on, well, I have to be in charge.
mm,
I'm the boss here, I'm the teacher here, and this is something that's very much a problem in the school system right now. The teacher must contain control all the time, and they have to be in charge, and they have to say how things go. And that's one of the reasons there are so many problems in schools right now, because this is not how it works. Energetically, that is blocking. It is stunting the growth of both teacher and student, and no one is happy with stunted growth.
Mm. It's actually, kind of interesting that you say that because my big issue with control, when I worked invisibly, it wasn't much of an issue. It was like, okay, what's next? What do I got to do now? Okay, fine, do that. Not that I was perfectly out of not controlling things, but it was a lot easier to do when I wasn't the face of what I was doing, when I was just the thing to be forgotten later. But now that it's my kind of part of my responsibility to have my face on things, or my brand, if you will, now I'm adapting to that. I'm learning to incorporate that is the better wording to it. So part of it is if before it didn't matter what I did because it's to tie into my answer for the assignment, all the time I worked invisibly and didn't care about the consequences, it got what needed to be done happened.
Right.
So now I'm in the place where I'm trying to assimilate doing whatever it takes to make things happen and being the face of something. But the and I'll be right open about it. Like I've seen tons of examples of people just doing what, or at least people giving the presentation of doing whatever the hell they want and still keeping their brand going. So now it's kind of trying to make that a reality for myself.
It, it sounds to me like you simply need to do exactly what you were doing before,
Yeah.
but now instead of being invisible, you're seen.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. It's
Yeah.
not nothing complicated per se, but
Exactly.
it's still a big
Mm-hmm.
step
Yeah.
because it's a change out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's where the growth's at, and
Yeah.
you know that as well as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. My thought for the previous example was specifically teachers in schools and the
Mm-hmm.
students that they're kind of teaching them and they're sitting on them at the same time. And that's
Yeah.
so unhelpful because when that kid leaves school, they're not prepared for the world. And parents who don't let their teens make mistakes, don't let them experiment on stuff. And no, I'm not talking drugs, at
Mm-hmm.
least not. Anyway, we'll leave that one.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking drugs,
Yeah.
but like if you don't let your kid try that crazy haircut
Mm-hmm.
or work that job that you don't think is
Yeah.
worth their while, that kind of thing. If they don't experience stuff, they have no yardstick to measure life by.
Yeah.
And you're not doing them any services. You're not doing them a favor. They cannot excel and they can't find where they are in the world if you don't let them. So
That's true.
that need for control between teacher and student, parent and kid can be problematic because it's misplaced. It's also a total illusion. There is no control. You don't control another human being. You can trip them up, you can put them in a box, you can do stuff to them, but that's still not actually controlling that person. It just has a
Yeah.
look of control, but it's not real control.
Well, it's funny because you say that, and it makes me think of if you look at um, a nature documentary and you see animals who have a culture of harems,
Right?
one of the immediate things you'll notice is that while there may be the bull or whatever, the leader of the pack or whatever, might sit on the top and mate with whoever they want, the others, the not so alphas, will run around and mate and do all kinds of things behind the back of the supposed leader of the group of animals.
Well, yeah, that's a good example in nature. And to go back to parenting, because that
Mm.
is something I've
Yes.
done work on in for
Mm.
years and been a parent. Um, but one of the things with parenting is if you keep strict control over your kids,
Mm.
what happens is they become really good at being sneaky because they're
Yeah.
just going to do the thing they want to do anyway, only they're not going to let you know it's happening. And that's one of the strongest arguments against smacking your kid is what you teach them to do when you do that is you teach them to fear you and you teach them to be real sneaky, real fast because they're still going to do the stuff. They learn nothing about the rights and wrongs of what they were doing. That message does not get passed
Nope.
on through hitting them. What they get is it's okay to hit somebody if I'm angry, and by the way, I'd better make sure that this person doesn't see me doing anything because I'll be in trouble. So chances are their behavior is going to be even worse where you're not around. So you might think you have control. You might think you've got that whole thing sorted. You don't. You exactly don't. It's
Mhm.
100% wrong. You couldn't be further from the goal that you think you're achieving. And that, I think, is that there's an African proverb that
Mhm.
says, power is like an egg. If you hold it too tightly, you'll crush it and lose it. If you hold it too loosely, meaning you don't even guide your kids,
Right.
then you're going to drop it and lose it. You have to have just the right balance.
Yes.
So you guide your kids, you don't control them. That's my interpretation of that African proverb, which I kind of like the egg proverb.
Well, you're right. Like power is an interesting idea, especially I don't know why my brain went to the physics of it. And some formulas floated by, but that's not important from what I can think of, anyways. But yes, when you have the responsibility of a certain, well, you know what? This is probably the matter. Power comes with responsibility. It's not
Yep.
just a Spider-Man thing.
Nope.
It comes with responsibility. And if you don't, how many tangents can I break myself up on? I will reuse a sentence I've been using a lot lately. I believe in personal freedom above everything else, but I believe you should take responsibility for your freedoms. Because if you don't take responsibility for your freedoms, and for people who have a vote coming up, the tyrant comes in and the tyrant is invited
Hmm.
if you do not take responsibility for your freedoms. That's how you lose your freedoms, by not taking responsibility for them. People won't usually take them away from you for the most part if you're responsible with your freedoms. But what ends up happening is if you don't take responsibility for your freedoms, the people around you start deciding maybe we should take that person's freedoms away. And if you convince people that you're abusing your freedoms, which is another thing to consider, you still get the similar idea that the tyrant gets invited in. The tyrant never has to come in, with a massive army shooting guns blazes. They get invited. And it's strictly because people don't take responsibility for their power, for their freedoms, for the things they do in life.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It's very much a case of I want all the things that I want, and there's no sense of responsibility to balance that. And that just opens the door for somebody to come in and take advantage of you in your negative space of gimme, gimme, gimme.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they sure will. That tyrant's sure going to give you some things. And you can complain about it at your leisure later because you already lost your ability to stand up and be counted in that situation. So, yeah, that's really important. And right now, seeing as you mentioned the political thing, the vote
Yeah.
coming up, okay, totally going there. Right now, in that situation, people are so busy yelling at everybody else about what they don't like that they are not looking at what is my role in this? What do I want? Not
Mm-hmm.
what do I not want, but what do I want? And why am I so vehemently opposed to this particular way of doing things? We need a lot more thought and a lot more accountability and responsibility going on. And these things are not happening right now. I have seen some outrageous political posts that are just attacking someone simply because of the party they represent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, could you look at strength of character? Could you look at what they actually propose to do? That could be more of a concern. But if you don't look, you won't know.
Yeah.
And voting to spite another group of people
Mm-hmm.
isn't the way to go. That's the way to invite the tyrant in. That's not the
Yeah.
way to have any semblance of control, really. So, that's like, look at what you're inviting in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want that? Is
Yeah.
that the way you want to go? And if it is, well, okay.
And
It's gonna be a
it's even more
thing.
interesting for people to pay attention to is that I'm not referring to one specific political party.
Neither was I.
As an impassioned observer, all sides stand to lose no matter who gets brought in because of their behavior.
Yes.
You don't want to lose your freedom with guns? Be better at managing the gun culture that goes with it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have
And you
people shooting up
see,
schools if people weren't very loose with their gun culture.
and that's one of the first things that people start yelling about, right? There's a lot of codependency going on in these situations. You'll have a school shooting, and right away, certain people who are very pro-gun will respond with thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and prayers. I mean, it's a joke, you know, it's coming.
Yeah.
There's no thoughts, there's no prayers. They don't actually give a toss, but this is their code for you're not taking away
Yeah.
our gun rights. Well, you know, that is a topic for like 5 episodes all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But the refusal to accept any responsibility, I mean, there's even arguments over guns kill people. And the most ludicrous, nonsensical arguments will come up. You know, oh well, I guess pens write books, and you know,
Yeah.
da da da. And it just doesn't make sense.
No.
And that's the thing, is an awful lot of politics right now on either side doesn't make sense. And people aren't looking for it to make sense. That's the problem, is nobody's saying, you're not making sense. Can you please explain to me what you actually mean? Nobody's asking that question. And if they were, they'd discover that there's a lot of empty vessels making a huge amount of noise.
Yeah.
That's what we got going on. And
Mm-hmm.
that is problematic because
And that's how
somebody
you know.
somewhere is pulling
Yeah.
the strings on this. And
Yeah.
that's problematic.
And that's kind of why, like, I didn't refer to one particular political party because there's a lot of different ways of losing your freedom because you're looking at what the other side is doing, but you're not looking at what your side is doing.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so you might miss out on stuff. Like, I'll argue this just to throw it in for the people who are more conservative minded. Roe versus Wade could have been a non issue if the people who said they championed it would have codified it into law a
Mhm.
long time ago when they had the power to, but they didn't.
Right. And I'm sure they had some ideas about why they
Yeah.
didn't, and they were probably not the purest of ideas.
No.
But right now, political problems are across
Mm-hmm.
the board.
Yes.
And I wouldn't point to any party on any country that I can think of, actually, and say, these are the good guys. No, that doesn't exist in
No,
politics
that's the
anymore.
thing, right? Like I said, I live
It's,
in a country where my prime minister, my leader, thinks I'm sexist, racist, ignorant because I didn't take a vaccine. So, and that was the
well,
party I used to vote for. So,
I was going to say my views on your current prime minister are
yeah,
not very sweet. So, you know, and yes, I once upon a time I thought he was a better person than he's turning out to be
yeah.
for different reasons, right?
And the
But
alternative, yeah, and the
and the
alternative people
alternative,
aren't giving me any more, aren't exciting me anymore either. So,
exactly.
yeah.
And I think that's a huge problem across the board. And we've arrived at this place politically in different countries because we're not asking the right questions. We're not saying, well, what do you stand for? What will you do? And then when they're in power, hold them accountable to that. There's none of this happening anymore. I'm not sure it was ever brilliant, but it's worse
No.
now than it's clearly worse now than it has been for generations. And it's like, what is going on?
Well,
Again, I'm not saying previously politicians were good people.
no.
I think there is a question when somebody's so power hungry about why they are so power hungry, and to purest of heart, I don't know that politicians have ever been accused of that.
No, it's a difficult thing because, we all have a certain tolerance level for stress. And when you become a world leader, that stress is high. So you have to start wondering, are you missing parts of your psyche that you can actually adapt to this level of stress? Like, what's going on with you that you're willingly seeking this out?
Yeah, and
It's
and
that
why
or
do
you're skipping
people
out on the responsibilities that cause those stresses.
And I think there's a lot of skipping out on
Yeah.
responsibilities because if you look at it, the things that people in government will sign off on and agree to, often morally unconscionable. Like
Mm,
they're not moral, they're not ethical, they're not any of these things, but somebody's paying them for it.
yeah,
And that's the bottom line because it becomes now not, I want to be in a position of power for the good of the people.
mm,
It becomes, I'm in a position of power and I want to stay here. I
yeah,
want to keep this. And they will do all kinds of dirty tricks in order to stay there. And again, this is not one party, this is just politics. This is how it rolls. And in the US, the lobby companies take full advantage of this, whining, dining, sending on
mhm,
holidays, contributing to your campaigns, etc., etc.
mm.
And it's not even a secret. Everybody knows that happens.
No,
It's
you
not
know,
even a secret. So this is politics, actually, is who has the money. Well, when you've got that kind of system going on, I'm going to say, well, what questions are you asking? What are you looking for in your politicians now? Are you just voting for this person to piss off that person? Is that the level you're at? Wow.
yeah,
Then that's the level of politician you'll get, right?
yeah, and you know
That's
what?
exactly what you'll get as
Yeah,
governance.
and you know, there's actually a way to there's actually a justification for this discussion in terms of thinking as witches and wizards do. And I almost lost it for a second. So there's an organization that's right across from Congress, and they'll give like office supplies, they'll give interns and stuff like that for various politicians in exchange for policies. And none of this is a secret.
Hmm.
I've actually watched a couple of documentaries on it, and none of it is being denied, not by the people in the organization, not by anyone in Congress. So the corruption is very much there, very much in the open. And actually, on the Canadian side, what I'll offer is this. In the 90s, there was a panel discussion on, we can't continue politics the way we're doing it. It's becoming more corrupt. We have to get back, we have to kind of get back to representatives actually representing their districts. And that was in the 90s. That was near mid to late 90s. And of course, everything went downhill after that discussion. Things
Right,
just got visibly worse since that
right.
happened.
Now, I'm going to bring up a country that may be a little controversial here for
Right.
politics, but Singapore
Okay.
has a wonderful attitude to politics. Now, I'm sure the discerning listeners probably screaming at this point, what? But I've lived there. So unless you have, you might not know quite what I know about
Well,
the way their
they have a
politics.
benign dictator, don't they? Isn't that Singapore?
No, they don't have a dictator. A lot of people have that perception because they do have a very strong political party
Because
that
I've heard interviews with people from Singapore, and I'm trying to think, is it Singapore that I'm thinking about?
it might be, but let me explain.
Yes, go ahead.
So back in like late 50s, I would say, Singapore was a hot mess. It
Mm,
was a drug ground because it's right in the middle of all the major
mm,
drug growing countries. So it was a place where people were trafficking drugs a lot. There was riots in the street. There was lots of violence. They'd been invaded by Japan during the Second World
mm,
War, and they'd had a hard time from that and they were suffering. And this guy who Chinese origin, educated in the UK, was a
mm,
lawyer. He decided that he wanted to sort this out, and his name was Lee Kuan Yew. And Lee Kuan Yew went to the polls and said to people, okay, vote me in, and you have a choice. You can have money or you can have freedom. Which do you want? And people, there was a referendum, literally. People
yeah, okay.
voted, they wanted money.
Right.
So he said, okay, fine. So there are still elections and you can elect somebody else,
Right.
although, that's not the most easy thing to do because the other parties don't tend to get enough oomph to get where they're
Yes.
going. But the piece that I'm bringing forward that
Right.
I would argue is very positive about Singapore is those ministers have to spend a big chunk of time within their constituencies listening to their people. They must do this and they have to show up for work and they have to do their jobs. They don't skive off.
Right.
And if they take bribes, the fallout from that is massive. For Chinese culture, saving face is really important.
Right.
And if somebody shames you publicly, this is like one of the worst things that can happen in your life. And you can bet that that would happen to a politician taking bribes. They would also get massive fines. They probably
Mm.
get kicked out of wherever they're living. Like the punitive stuff that happens to somebody that does that is huge and swift. Singapore is very swift with its judgment.
Right.
And the reason this is in place is because they want a pristine working situation there
Mhm.
for the politicians. And politicians are paid a huge amount of money in Singapore. And the reason they're paid a huge amount of money is so that they don't need to take bribes.
Right.
And they understand that you get this money, therefore you don't take bribes. Like this is the
Hmm.
deal. And for the most part, that works pretty well. For the most part, that works well.
Mm.
And Singapore is known as the fine city. It's a city state. It has
Yeah.
laws about everything. That's what it's known for. It is laws, chewing gum, laws about this,
Yeah.
laws about that. That's what you've heard for Singapore. But what I would like to add to
Mhm.
that is yes, they have all of these laws, but they don't use them all the time. So what I found when I was living there was if a problem comes up, the local newspaper that's the government mouthpiece, if you will,
Mhm.
starts featuring it on the front page every day for a week to 10 days. They
Mhm.
will mention this problem over and over. And you know there's a crackdown coming. And the police will go out and they'll round up a few people
Mhm.
that are doing this particular behavior, whatever it is. They give them ludicrous fines, right? And it's splashed all over the newspapers. And then the behavior goes away. People stop doing it because they don't want what's going to happen. And there's no one saying, you can't do that. That's not fair. This person had a rough childhood or
Mhm.
whatever. Like that doesn't work. It's the justice is too swift for
Mhm.
that. The result of that is you have a country where I could walk home at 2 o'clock in the morning on my own and feel safe. And it's the only country in the world I have ever felt that way, ever. So, and I've lived in 8 and I've traveled to a great many
Mhm.
more. Singapore's the only place where I truly feel safe. So that's the responsibility and asking the right
Well,
questions. It's a lot of things. Is it
yeah.
ideal? Of course it isn't. We're human. Nothing's ideal. But does it work? I would argue absolutely yes. I had 2 teenagers while I was there,
Mhm.
and those kids could go out and come back at like 1 in the morning or whatever. I was not worried about them
Mhm.
because I knew that they knew where the boundaries were and what they could and couldn't do, and I knew they weren't going to mess with that because
Mhm.
the price to pay is too high.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because part of it is like as far as politicians go, they're setting harsh limits, but they're also taking responsibility for the harsh limits by making sure the politicians are paid well enough
Yeah,
to not cause the problem in the first place.
right.
So is anything perfect in this world? No, but it is an example of we want we want A, so we're going to do everything we need to get A, and we're going to do it in a way that actually makes the people want A and not
Right.
fight it.
And it's all out, it's open. So you're always going to have people that say, "Oh, this is terrible. It's a dictatorship. It's this, this, this." I suppose functionally it might be
Mm,
because the opposition party never get it together enough to
yeah,
be a force to be reckoned with.
mm,
And the ruling party definitely have something to do with that. There's no question.
yeah,
But there is accountability to the people.
mhm,
And if your local minister isn't doing his work and you want to go complain about that, they will take you very, very seriously. There's
mm.
no covering up on this stuff. There's a whole lot of face saving and what have you going on, yes, but
Yeah, I was
there's
gonna
this,
say there's
but
that element that comes into it.
that need to be seen, to be honest,
Hmm.
is important. Whereas I would argue it doesn't matter a stuff in the US. Like, clearly, we have a convicted felon running for
Hmm.
presidency. So obviously, nobody cares about that. How can it even be, right? You would not get that in a country like Singapore.
Well,
That's simply, you won't even see that guy again, let alone anything else. So it's just where are your values and where are your questions?
it's funny because speaking of leadership and where people aren't honest about things, So in the 80s, the Republicans had Ronald Reagan, who was also senile during his, at least starting during his first administration and into the second one. And I thought, okay, no party is ever going to be that irresponsible. You know, that takes like a certain group of people. Only to now see Biden in decline, and still, they had originally still wanted to run him, even though he was in decline. And I'm like, the one thing I used to always say is at least they're not running someone like Reagan, who's in mentally, who's running into mental deficiencies. But now both sides have tried to run someone with mental deficiencies in their parties.
And again, people aren't asking the right questions. They're busy yelling at each other
Mm-hmm.
about what's wrong with the other guy. And it's just that is not the point. What I would like to know is what is right with your guy. And
Yeah.
I keep asking people this, like until a recent comer in the race, shall we say, who's been
Mm-hmm.
spouting off some rather misogynistic things, which is staggering to hear. But until that point, I was very firmly on the fence as to which way to go with this because like there's problems on both sides and I'm not happy with either of them and nobody's asking the questions. I would like some answers, please. And I would ask people who state their position very
Mm-hmm.
clearly, well, why? Why is your person the best
Mm-hmm.
person? And they would start yelling about the other one. And I'm like, no, 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 I don't care about that. Why is your person somebody that I should pay attention to? Tell me. I really want to know. And I would get these sort of puzzled looks. And like, well,
Yeah.
because that one's doing this. And it's like, no, 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 not what I'm asking. Focus with me.
Mm-hmm.
What is your person doing that's so good? Please tell me. I'm genuinely asking. I seek to understand. And that conversation is not happening enough for people to be able to answer it. And they just look at me like, you must be a lefty. It's like, why? Because I'm asking a question? Is that where that puts me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see me as being either of these things. So why don't you want to answer my questions? Like, what is that? And that's, I think, happening all over the place now. It's like everybody's just yelling at everybody else, whether it's Canada, whether it's
Yeah.
UK, whether it's US. It's just like, what is going on? People,
You know,
that
it's interesting.
responsibility is, I
Yeah.
don't think people can spell the word anymore.
No, it's funny because you say, to borrow a term, I would consider myself a filthy leftist liberal, but that just means what my default positions would be. I am all in favor if someone comes up with a good idea. It doesn't matter what party they belong to, what their philosophy is, as long as it's a good solution and it's helpful. I don't care who brings it up. But like I said, I'll default to leftist liberal ideas, but I'm open to anything that actually works. But I'm a big believer of there's no one perfect system, but there is a system that's good for the time that it needs to be, that we need, that it's needed for. Like I would say, capitalism at one point, it brought in a bunch of innovation. Now capitalism is just eating itself. It's like a
Yes.
monopoly game gone too long. Now there's no one to pay you money anymore. There's
Yep.
nothing left for you to conquer. So then you have to go back to something else that'll bring innovation. Because like you don't need the promise of more resources to innovate things. Hardship
Right.
is just as much a motivator for innovation as anything is.
Well, this science fiction writer who my husband's very fond of is
Yeah.
Heinlein. And Heinlein said, I believe it was Heinlein, that said if you want to get something invented, you want to find a new way to do things, ask a lazy man how to do it
Yeah.
because they're going to find the easy path, right? And that's good. That's actually a good thing. You want that, but it doesn't have to be money driven.
Mm-hmm.
We already know communism doesn't work. I mean, it's good on paper, it just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work with people. Um, we need something different now. And what we've got isn't working. And that's whether it's politics, whether it's school. And we're in a time of transition. I mean,
Yes.
human design has put a stick in the ground back in the 80s and said 2027
Mm-hmm.
is going to mark some huge transitions in the world. Um, and with any of these transition times, there's always tumultuous events in the years running up
Mm.
to, and we're seeing that. And the question then is going to be, how are you showing up for it? Because it's there whether you want it or not. Your thoughts on the subject aren't really the point. It's more, what are you going to do? Are you going to ride the wave? Are you going to swim under it? Like, where are you aiming for this? And how are you positioning yourself? And what do you intend to do with this massive change that's happening?
Mm.
Because it's coming. What we have is broken, what we have isn't working. And you can pick a system. So you want to look at the police force?
Mm.
You want to look at medical,
Yeah.
schools? I mean, pick a thing. Find me one that's working. That's actually going to be an awful lot quicker. Find me something that is functioning and is adequate for the needs of the planet and the people on it. And I would be thrilled to know what that is. I've been looking and I can't find anything. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found it yet.
Mm.
But everything is broken, nothing's working. So clearly, we have to find another way. The phoenix from the ashes kind of deal. We got to
Yeah.
find another way to be, or we won't be. Simply as that.
Yeah. It's, these are my own musings here. So my encouragement for the last 10 years is to do more things online.
Okay.
So what it makes me think is that when we think of tumultuous changes to come, I don't think it's going to be of an infrastructure damaging variety, for lack of a better wording for that.
Okay.
Unless I've only been told to use the internet because I need to do things really fast before things go to hell in a handbasket. And then in which case also the internet is good for. But I suspect that infrastructure wise, that's not what's going to change. Some infrastructure, I'm sure, because some infrastructure always get damages when there's a big change. But I think for the most part, it's going to be a very big societal change rather than a physical, materialistic change.
I don't know. I think it might be all of the things, but
Mm.
we won't know until we see it, right?
No,
That's one of those
we won't.
take the step because something's going to come up to meet your
Mm-hmm.
foot. I have no idea what that's going to be, but there'll be something there. And the question is, how are you going into it? And if you think of COVID, which was a
Mm-hmm.
really good uh, trial run, if you will, a dummy run of how things are broken and
Mm-hmm.
things have to change, right? There was a lot wrong with how that was handled, and there's a lot wrong with how it even happened in the first place. And, we can go into all of that sometime. But the thing that we found with COVID was how people responded to it. That was fascinating. There were some people who were so excited to be able to rat their neighbors out for not wearing masks and
Yeah.
they couldn't wait to report on other people. It's like, oh, so you're the Nazi supporters. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's your role, collaborating with the regime. Okay. That's to do a historical comparison. So you got those people. Then you got the people who say, screw you. If you're going to get COVID, then just, stay in your house and don't bother coming near me.
Yeah.
Right. So there was that. I'm not going to take any responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for keeping other people safe. I don't care. I'm doing my thing. And then you got those who were sort of cowed into, well, I have to respond in this way and have this vaccine or I lose my job. Or, I have to do that because the government says so, etc. And basically what you saw coming to the fore here is people's fears. They informed their decisions. And a few people were able to stay to say, you know what? No, I'm not doing any of those things. I'm doing it this way. And hats off to those people. Like, I salute you. Unfortunately, I was not one of them. I was one of those who had a job that required I had the
Mm-hmm.
vaccine, and I'm not a fan. That is not something anybody should ever be forced to have. And I have a lot to say on the subject of being a guinea pig. But what that whole thing did was it showed us how people are going to come in a big change event, right? So say
Yeah.
2027 marks some pivotal changes, you will have people falling into these different groups in a bigger way. Politically right now, when you look at the anti-Semitism and what have you,
Mm.
it is the most perplexing and rampant. Like I keep thinking people are going to wake up and see how insane this is, but yet they don't wake up. So it's like, well, okay, so we're seeing which side people are falling on and why. And this is what happens in times of big change. It's a bit like rats in a cage turning on each other.
Yeah, it's I think for me, probably because I'm a member of several minority groups myself, that it was always confusing to me that people judge one person based on the rest of a group because everyone's an individual. But I mean, yes, I am like majority white, so that's not the issue I'm getting at. I'm a cultural minority kind of a thing, a little bit of a racial minority, but not enough to really be, only some people notice it when it happens. But what I keep, what I've noticed about when you're in the minority, you have when you look at the majority, you have a bigger group to look at. So you have a bigger sample size of behavior to be clinical about it. Whereas when you're the majority looking at a minority, you have a smaller sample size of things to draw from. And that's not enough information to make a good decision. Okay, 50 million tangents in my mind because I have a bunch of examples of this. So we tend to then, to make life easy, we deal with individuals as individuals. But we're still stuck in the mentality of what that group represents, even if it's fair or not. And to give you a personal example, a friend of mine who had been friends with for years at this point, and then there was some disruption going on where I lived at the time, and it was they wanted to take French language away from official language from that jurisdiction. Even though the town had a French name, the city had a French name, they wanted to take French away from the jurisdiction as an official language. And there were the normal agitators who'd come in from out of town who jump on all these arguments, making everything worse. And he
Mhm.
said to me at one point, he says, "How come French people want this, or how come French people want that treatment and that treatment?" And I kind of looked at him like, "How long have you known me?" And I said, like, first of all, have you ever heard me say anything that I want this, I want that? I said the French language, like, French is an official language of Canada. Therefore, everything on a federal level has to be done in French and English. So that's just in the Constitution. No one is asking for anything special. That's how the country is organized. Like, but the fact that he said that statement, and like, I'm not even, and I wasn't his only French Canadian friend. Like, half the group was French Canadian. So I'm like, have you ever heard of any of us ask for anything? Like, say, give us something special? Like, none of us have ever done that. None of us have ever spoken on the topic. None of us have ever made a big deal about it. I've even spoken about, I don't think it's right if you need a certain amount of population to get funding for, like, say, a French school, then that's the rules in place. And until someone goes in and lobbies for something different, I don't think you should be giving money when it's not something that's already supposed to be allotted. Like, because I understand that money's finite. But there would be this distinction between me as his friend, even though I am French Canadian, and French Canadians as a group, that as the other, you know. And you can see it like with people who have friends of certain groups. They think of that person as an individual, they're fond of them, probably take a bullet for them. But their identity group, they might think, oh, why does that group want these things? Why does that group behave that way? But it's like your friend doesn't behave that way. Your friend doesn't look at it that way. Why are you assuming everyone else in that group behaves that way? But I think it's the
Yeah, I
distinction
think
between individuals and groups and
the
how we look
shift
at
is happening more significantly when it comes to this current situation, and everybody is put into one category that is
it.
wildly
Yes.
incorrect and unfactual. And this you can't adequately fight against something that's unreal, right? Like
Yes.
it's really hard to do that because as we've seen time and time again in recent years, facts don't seem to matter. Like you can present the facts and they'll just say it's not true. And
Mhm.
we have somebody running for president who's been doing this repeatedly, and like
Yes.
people will just gloss over it. They don't care. And I think that represents a huge shift in how people show up now. And that's moving, I mean, to go all the way back to the title for this podcast of
Yeah.
love,
Sorry.
this is actually the antithesis of that.
Yes.
This is moving as far away from that as it's possible to do so, because you are considering everybody else as other.
Yes.
Everybody else who does not fit your worldview, no matter how cockeyed that is,
Hmm.
everybody else is othered. And this is when we face great danger as a species because, the human race, if everybody is othering everybody else, that leaves a whole bunch of isolated people who feel that everyone else is wrong. And
Yes.
that is the self-destruct button that gets pressed. And, nobody comes out of that one very well. That's like, so we have to decide as individuals and collectively, how are we going to handle this big change that's coming up? Now, it's not a question of who's right and who's wrong. You can be dead and right, and you can be dead and wrong. It
Mhm.
really, you're still dead. It
Yep.
doesn't help. So, that wouldn't be the point actually as to who's right and who's wrong. Just a question of how are we going to navigate the new things that are coming up? Because this is not people wanted COVID to, everything to return to normal after COVID. Well, it's not going to do that. It's never going to go back to anything. And it's like you or I saying, I want to return to the body I had when I was 20.
Right.
Well, unless you've got one in a freezer somewhere, that is not happening
Yes.
because you've moved on, right?
Yes.
And you can sort of work to get certain attributes that you may have had at that time. Like if you wanted your beard a particular color that you had when you were 20, you could dye it at
Yeah.
that color. Okay. But
Hmm.
does that mean it's the same thing you had then? No, it's your version now of what you had then. So things don't go backwards. We cannot return to what life was like pre-COVID. We can't return to life pre-Trump. We can't return to life pre-Reagan, or pick an event, pick a thing pre-communism. Like
Yeah.
we cannot go back. We can only see what we can do with going forward. And then the question is, are you moving forward with love, or are you moving forward with hating everybody else and the need to be right?
Hmm.
And that's something that people are deciding whether or not they choose to decide it consciously. Your actions decide it. So, how do you want to show up? That's the big question.
Yeah.
And everybody has to answer that, and non-action is an action.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why lies of omission are still a lie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean behavior, right? I'm a behavior analyst.
Yep.
So what is behavior? Anything that you do is a behavior. Lying down is a behavior. Getting up and going for a jog is a
Yeah.
behavior. Voting is a behavior. Not voting is a behavior. They're all behaviors,
Mhm.
right? You don't get to not behave. You're alive, therefore you're behaving.
That's true. Like, there's no going backwards. There's only going away from where you started.
Yes.
Just because something is facing a different direct, something is facing differently, doesn't mean you're going backwards. You're just going away when you look at
And
it.
and spending your focus and your energy in wanting to go back to something
Mhm.
or looking backwards and saying, well, it was better then, let's get back to where we were in the 50s or whatever, this is not possible because we're a different species now. That is not who we
Yeah.
are. Human beings now in 2024 are not the same people who were on this planet in 1954. We are arguably completely different
Mhm.
species. The bodies may look the same if you do an autopsy or
Mhm.
something, but I would
Yeah.
argue actually no, they don't. They're bigger now, and there's
Yeah.
changes. that are happening. The evolution is continuing.
Mhm.
So we are not the same species. And if you look at the kids who are arriving now, Gen Alpha,
Mhm.
these kids are wired. They are wired to the internet. They
Mhm.
are wired to the unseen. And they have a whole different, their brains are different. If you
Mhm.
scan them, you can see that the brains work different.
Yes.
The neural pathways are different.
Yeah.
So you cannot, I don't care how hard you want to drag us all back to the 50s or
Mhm.
whatever, it cannot happen because we are not that species.
Mhm. And
Straight up.
I'll give you a practical example of that. When times are tough for me, I'll usually cut the internet during the summer or when
Okay.
it's warmer outside, because then I can go outside and do stuff. That's fine. It's perfect. But you know who's not outside? Everybody else.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
was like, wow, this is depressing because nobody's outside.
It's we have shifted from what used to be considered normal and was closer to being healthy for human beings than
Mhm.
anything we see now. I mean, to get back to schools, and I'm always going to use that as a prime example of things broken, kids get maybe a 15-minute recess.
Mhm.
They often eat lunch at their desks. And if you do something your teacher doesn't like, the first thing they're going to take off you is recess.
Yeah.
So you're not outside at all. And then we have parents who are fearful your kid can't walk home from school, they might get kidnapped. Well,
Yeah.
possible depending on where you live as to how likely that is, but this is a thing that parents have now is you can't walk home from school. Ask anybody in Gen X how they grew
Yeah.
up. And man, you took yourself to school, from
Yeah.
school, you cooked your own dinner,
Mhm.
you did your own laundry, like you did all the things.
Yeah.
And that same group of people have grown up to parent now in a way that, well, that wasn't safe. How I grew up wasn't safe, so you're not doing any of that. And
Yeah.
now we have, and it has a knock-on effect. And we have people that are fear-based, they shout a lot, and we're just moving further and further away from where we want to be. All the time, people are saying, we want to get back to whatever the ideal is of the old days, but the old days were never ideal.
Well, that's the thing, eh? I've been through for the last few years. I've had the occasional where I go through a what do you want to call it? I go through moments where I'm feeling nostalgic for my childhood because when you get older, that happens.
That must be
So I'll watch
nice.
commercials and stuff or TV shows from back then. But there's some things I can't do. I cannot watch old TV shows.
Okay.
Eh, I have a hard time with old cartoons. I have but where it really hit me the most is I'd watch old commercials for old toys and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like the toys are better now. The toys graphically are better. People like as a fan of superhero stuff when I was a kid, when you pull out something that's supposed to be a superhero toy and it says the name of the character across it, it's like you're ruining the fantasy first of all. But people
Right.
want to get the name across, right? So a lot of toys from before to me, I don't think they're that awesome compared to what's out now. Now you have like action figures with all these posable or all these points of articulation. You can buy lightsabers and whatever. Like, I mean, we used to have those knockoff ones that glowed in the dark that weren't really lightsabers, but
But the thing is, you had more imagination then. We
yes.
don't need imagination now. So, I can see pros and cons,
Yeah.
but the point is, even if you yearn for days where imagination was more important, we can't go back there because we've gone past that now. And we're in this place. You can't turn to a kid and say,
Yes.
okay, I want you to give up your lightsaber and go grab a stick and pretend it's a lightsaber. They're going to
Yeah.
look at you like you're nuts and probably give you a mouthful, right? Because
Yeah.
that's where we're at now. That's where society has moved to, like it or not. So looking backwards to say, well, it should be like that is no more helpful than sticking your head in the sand for, where we're going in the future. And looking forward, if you look forward with fear, then that too keeps you stuck. And that's not helpful either. So there is a lot of internal work, spiritual work, I think, for people to do to figure out how they're going to be and who they're going to be moving forward. What do you stand for? What will you tolerate? What do you want for others? Who are you as a human being? That's a very important question.
Mm.
And are
Yeah.
you here to pull other people down? Are you here to ignore them? Lift them up? Like what is the point? Because we are by nature social animals. So we will have an impact on the people around us. The question is what do you want yours to be? People are
Mm.
very fond of talking about legacy, which I think is another one of those grossly overused words. But the reality is, what impact do you want to have on the people that come in contact with you? And that's a question I'd love for people to sit down every morning for 10 minutes and just think about that for
Yeah.
themselves, right? Like, how am I showing up?
Yeah.
And am I being the best version of me that I can be? Or am I just going with the loudest noise that's out there? Because,
Mm.
those are
It's
your
interesting.
options.
Yeah. The word legacy. So trying to remember the actor's name. He was in LA Law. I'm trying to, anyway, he was being interviewed, I think it was on David Letterman, and he had turned 50. And so he was being asked, what's that like turning 50? And he says, well, now I'm more worried about my legacy. And so I think I was 22, 23 maybe at the time. And I wondered, yeah, so when people get older, they worry about leaving a legacy. I never thought about it because 22, you live in the moment. Like you don't, there's no future. And but it stayed in my head for a long time. And then when I hit 50, I was like, am I really worried about legacy? Like it sat in my mind, but I'm like, but I don't really care. And I think we talked about it before the episode started. Like, I'm still not worried about leaving anything behind. I'm still more worried about getting stuff done now. Yes, it will have things that are left behind, but I'm not worried about it. I'm not fixed on it because I know at any moment I have to adapt and change it to what needs to be done. It's actually a big thing I've thought about when I started teaching the classes I teach now. It's the do like I worried if I make a legacy, it'll get corrupted, frankly, to be honest,
As they
even
often
in the
do.
first place. Because, and for people listening, just to know how much I thought about it, when I teach, I said, if you want to look at this in a formal way, rather than just we're two people and you're learning, I'm teaching you something, and then your reflection on what I'm teaching you teaches me something. If you want to go beyond that and have a formal setting, here's what's going to happen. Here, my title then is voice. I'm the voice of the spirits who want to talk to you until you can learn to listen to them yourself. And because I'm the one starting the program, I'm also the prime voice because I'm the first one. And I thought to myself, the minute I do that, especially something like the prime voice, people are going to fight for a title. They're going to want, oh, no, I'm the prime. No, and I'm like, so I said, if it amuses you to have a formal thing, refer to me as voice if that's something you want to do. But I'm not having a formal setting. I'm not doing that because I know, or at least I suspect where it can lead to people. Because the people who can be corrupted will gravitate to places where they see power, where they can take
Mhm.
advantage of power. And so my first thing was, as much as it amuses me to have a structure with titles, and that like amuses a part of me, it really does. But I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it because that's going to introduce a hierarchy, and it's going to introduce people who want to go through the hierarchy and want to have power. And so even the idea of leaving a legacy, frankly, kind of makes me go, if I leave something that has hierarchy or anything like that in it, there's no point in leaving a legacy at all.
Now, you see, that's one of the ways where being a witch or being a wizard, if you're a lone witch or
Mm-hmm.
wizard, which some people, some are in covens and what have you, and that's a path. It's not the only path by any means. And if you have your own practice and you do it your own way, then that is the definition of, showing up and doing what you're here to do, but not actually looking to leave a legacy because
Yeah.
you're not passing anything on to someone. You're simply contributing while you're here to the thing that you're contributing to. And then when you're not contributing to it, it's done. And that, it's kind of I've always found this legacy thing to be kind of interesting. Like, we have billions on this planet right now. Is every single
Mhm.
person leaving a legacy? And if so, for whom? And for how
Yeah.
long? And why this need to be important? That's the thing. Like, why we all want to be seen and heard, yes, but that's not the same as I have to feel that people are going to think about me for the next 100 years or whatever.
Right.
It's like, why? How does that help anything? And you want to do that. Why? For whom? Like, is it for your own importance, or is it truly for the benefit of the people you think are going to receive this legacy? And that's where I get very puzzled because it's unclear to me, but it typically seems to be the person talking about the legacy. They want to feel that they're important after they're no longer in their physical
Mhm.
body. And that really doesn't matter.
No.
But, it's a lot of people are focused on that. And again, when your focus is on something that sort of singular, what else are you missing? What around you could you be doing that you're missing, or could you be learning or discovering, or I don't know, because you won't know. You're not looking at it. You're looking at how do I make myself important? How do I get that statue outside the baseball stadium or whatever it's going to be, right? Like, pigeons are gonna just poop on it. Like,
Yeah.
what is the point? It's so people utter your name. It's not. It doesn't do anything. You still, when you're gone, you're still off doing the next thing. You're not here. So that that's probably not really a purpose of anything we've been talking about, but it's one of those things I sometimes wonder about. Like, why is everybody so busy trying to have a legacy?
You know, that's even more interesting because, well, I'll say it like this. You're thinking you're leaving behind a legacy that's attributed to you. I'll share with you a real life story. It didn't happen to me. And I did not do the research to confirm it completely. So, but there's a big cult right now in the world. Okay. I won't bother naming it, but it's very big. And the person who founded it is one person, and the person who is given credit for it is another person. The person who took credit for it was a student of the person who started it. And the person who started it didn't care about leaving a legacy. They just have their little area, their little shrine thing that they do, and they're happy. But his student took it and made a big cult and declares himself the founder of it.
Mhm.
So it's like, so just to give you an idea of legacy, not only is it possible that no one will remember you, it might even be misattributed to someone else because someone else
And
might
then
think,
misused. And then
yeah, misuse.
misused, right? Because I would argue that with cults, that is following a particular personality. And when someone follows a particular personality, the tendency, the marked tendency, is to whitewash anything they do that's not okay
Mm-hmm,
and attribute everything to, trust the process or trust that person or
mm-hmm,
whatever the catchphrase is.
mm-hmm,
And that can lead you to doing all kinds of things that you really don't want to be doing. That's you will have to unravel that at some future life in some future way. Like, it's and speaking of things that people misconstrue,
mm-hmm.
for goodness sakes, karma, people.
Yes.
The law of karma is literally the law of action. So when you do good things with good intention, then you may well reap good rewards. And all of that is in air quotes, right? But it might not be in this lifetime.
Yes, that's what I was going to
And
say. Karma
and
extends to another lifetime, not to this lifetime.
Totally. And likewise for actions that you take that are bad actions, as in they have repercussions on people that are not good, and your intention with them is bad, and you will reap that reward too, and not necessarily in this lifetime. And none of it is an achievement, right? Like it's just, it's what happens. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that's kind of the law of karma. So when people are like, oh, you did this thing that I don't like, and karma's going to get you, it's
Mhm.
just, oh, come on, that's the bogeyman under the bed. That's
Yeah.
not a thing that's going to happen, people. So if we could just understand that that is not what karma is, um, so don't be relying on that to either reward you or fix somebody else's wagon because, karma is also not judgmental. So, there's
Oh,
no, I don't like that, therefore, right? That's not, we have a lot of that in society right now. I don't like this, therefore it's wrong. And wow, that is a broken link in a logical chain. That is a big break in that link. Because you don't like it? Okay. Okay.
yeah.
And nobody else has to care, actually. And by the way, politically, because seeing as nobody else has to care came up, I
Yeah.
would say if I was to pick anything, I'm more libertarian than anything
Mm.
else, which is you can all do your thing, take responsibility for it, and leave me the hell alone. That's,
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
You bring that up, right? Because, like I say, right? So I identify as a filthy leftist liberal, but again, I've also said my primary thing, or my primary value is personal freedom above all else.
Right. So you'd be
But take
libertarian if you were
responsibility
this
for
side
your
of the
freedom.
border.
Because so just probably is an interruption. So to me, a libertarian, like, because I've thought about it before, libertarian sounds like a good title, but then just because when I listen to people talk, libertarians talk, a lot of the people who at least who are vocal are basically just conservatives in disguise for the most part. There
That
seem
can
to be
happen.
that to me. So then I don't adopt it because I know I am like, because even leftist is not the best way to describe me. Liberal is more of the way to describe because just
So,
about I'm always looking for new opportunities, right? Because if you look at my human design chart, all but three things are defined. Everything else is undefined in me. So
right. So libertarian can often, because libertarians aren't crazy about having big, massive government
right.
machinery going on, that sounds very conservative
Mm-hmm.
and could be. But the major difference, in my perspective, between a libertarian and somebody who's on the right is a libertarian does not wish to get in somebody else's business and tell
Right.
them how they can live their lives or what they can
Mm-hmm.
do with their bodies or what gender they have to identify as or any of those things. Libertarian says, not my business, you do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a massive difference between libertarian and right.
Yeah.
And left also very much has strong views on what they can and can't dictate to people. And they think they're very correct in their views. And I'm talking US. And okay, but also no. I'm like literally libertarian, like just you have the right to be a human being the way you have arrived to be a human being. Just as long as it's not getting in somebody else's face, including mine, you're good to go. And that's basically it. But when you want to be telling somebody else how they have to live or what they can and cannot do with their own bodies, that is a big, big no for me. You're stepping on some very serious sacred ground here, and that is not for the faint of heart. That is not for somebody who doesn't want to take responsibility. So, for example, if a person is pro-life and they don't want abortions to exist, well, first of all, they will just lead to more deaths because they'll be backdoor abortions, right? So
Yeah.
that's one thing. But the other thing is if you're pro-life and every child must live, et cetera, then you better be supporting some of those kids
Yeah.
and showing up and helping the single mother who's now going to spend the rest of her life struggling, right? So if you take on the responsibility of that decision and you don't let her decide,
Mm-hmm.
then your moral responsibility is to step in and support that kid.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to do that, pardon my language, this will have to be edited out, but shut the fuck up because it's
I
not
wasn't
your
gonna edit
business,
it out.
right? It's just,
Mm,
and that's more of a libertarian view, I believe.
mm,
It's like, no, you do not get to butt in on somebody else's space.
mm.
That's
Well, like I said, yeah, that's it. And it's funny because for people who this probably won't be a surprise to anyone. At some point in my life, I played Dungeons and Dragons. And for the most part, when they ask you to pick what your alignment is for your character, unless the class itself that I played specifically had an alignment requirement, I would always play chaotic good because again, personal freedom above all else.
right.
But because I also tend to be a more because I care about people, and since you threw something in, since I give a shit about people, me too, I will have my foul language. I used to always play chaotic good characters. And so, like I said, I tend to, in this day and age, pick filthy leftist liberal because it balances out the other forms of authoritarianism. But in the end, I do believe in personal freedom. And it's weird, this put me off on a tangent. Not off on a tangent. Like, so I look at the world and I look at the technology we have, and you can see the downside of it. And I think to myself, yeah, this technology is obviously not for everybody. But the thing is, especially from a wizard perspective, you never know who's going to do something fantastic with that technology. So my thing is, I don't restrict access to something because I don't know who's going to come across and do the genius, brilliant thing with it. I'd rather have a bunch of people not do anything interesting with it so that someone can come across and do the brilliant genius thing with it.
Again, it's the thing that you bring up with that is like you're saying
Yeah,
I'm not going to be the police for
right.
this particular thing because I don't know what the outcome could be,
Yeah,
right? I don't know where the brilliance is going to come from. That's the point. That's exactly it. And so many people now take it upon themselves to be judge and jury on things they know nothing about, which is utterly fascinating to me. I had a dispute with somebody some time back about cancel culture.
right.
And I am, you will be unsurprised to know, not in favor of cancel
Right.
culture. I don't think that that is appropriate. Nobody should have that power over another person's life. And this woman who I kind of knew, and I thought I thought we had more in common than it turns
Right.
out we do. But she said, no, we have to have cancel culture because otherwise, how do we stop the bad people from saying things we don't like? I quote. And
Yeah.
I said, whoa, 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 who are you deciding
Mm,
who's bad and what they can and can't say? Like, who gave you that power? And she said, well, we have to be able to do that. Otherwise, they'll just get away with things. And I was like, so this generic they, this
mm,
is people that say things that you don't like, therefore you can cancel them. You can affect their life in such a way that they might lose their livelihood or
mm,
something because you don't like something they said or you don't like their political
mm.
stance. And you feel that this is okay for you to have that power. And she was very confused about my question and didn't understand why it wouldn't be okay.
Yeah.
And I was stunned. I was gobsmacked, to use a very British expression,
Mm,
that she would take it upon herself to sort of be active in this cancel culture, deciding on who is okay to speak and who isn't. And that to
yeah.
me was utterly fascinating. It was just like, that is indicative of what is wrong with society right now. So this means I could do something or say something that you don't like, and suddenly I get shut down and my life can't happen the way it was
Yeah.
because somebody disagreed with me.
Mhm.
Really? This is okay? No, this is not okay. And
Yeah.
nor would I do it to another person. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
you can't do that. Not and expect a good outcome.
And it's funny, right? Because then it's an example of someone trying to control something, but then how do you know who the people are that are saying things that you don't like if you don't let them speak?
And also,
Yeah.
who is to say that your arbitrary
Yeah.
decision of what is okay and what isn't is quote unquote correct because we all have a different lens to look through. And so, this particular, I'll actually name what the event was so that people can, get all wound up over it.
Right.
But it was it was J.K. Rowling
Yeah.
was speaking at something, and she was basically being cancelled because of her views on trans people, which, by the way, had been taken and put out of context and what
Mhm.
have you. She didn't say quite what she's accused of saying. Not saying she's warm and fuzzy towards people who are trans, but the
That's
language was made more controversial by the
mhm.
people who wanted cancel culture. But either way, my stance on that was she should be allowed to have her opinion, and there's the end of it. She wrote these great books that people love,
Mhm.
and those have nothing to do with her views on trans. So you don't like that, don't go to one of her talks. Don't engage with her if you don't like what
Mhm.
she's saying. But to tie in all things Harry Potter have to go on fire and
Yeah.
and she can't speak anywhere anymore and she's got to be shut down. Well, who are you to do that? Why? You loved her a minute ago. Now she said something you don't like, and
Mhm.
suddenly she's evil. It's like, no, why don't you seek to understand? Why does she feel that way? What did she actually
Mhm.
say? And where's that coming from? And is there a dialogue you could maybe have? Or if you really think she's stuck in this and you don't like it, then, go in a different direction. Don't talk
Yeah.
to that person.
And it's interesting because one of my favorite people in the world is a trans woman, and we get along swimmingly well and everything. And but I did actually listen to what J.K. Rowling had to say, and there is a thing of how you handle trans people and how you do it from a legal perspective has, especially when it comes to trans women, can have a huge detrimental effect on biological women.
Right.
And
It
that was her point, if
Yes,
I understand it correctly.
and it can. And the thing is that there's a lot. See, this is one of those areas where we could do with really looking at what is happening here rather than what did that person say that you want to run off with and make bad.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Vegas one time, a friend of mine, we were having dinner with her. Her pronouns are still her, but she looks very male,
Right.
like beautifully built. Well, boy,
Mm-hmm.
she works out and she looks awesome, right? And we were at dinner and she said, "Oh, I'm going to have to leave. I need to find a family restroom and I don't think
Right.
there's one anywhere near here." And I said, "Well, there's a women's just over there." She said, "I can't go in there." And, me being me and not accepting these can't do things, I said, "That's rubbish. Let's go." We're going in there. And it became a very hostile environment very quickly. And I had to get her to talk so that the women around us could hear that this was a female.
Yeah.
And I realized at that point, first of all, my crass error in hauling her off in there, that was my bad, and I should not have done that, but I did not realize how that was going to
Yeah.
go down. She did. And then I realized, okay, there's actually a bigger conversation here. We
Mm-hmm.
need to have places that, it's one unit and a person goes in there at one time and that's okay. It can
Yeah.
be for any gender at this point, and those need to be more available. It's not so much, a trans woman can go into a woman's bathroom and that's okay. I did see that recently, actually, in a
Mm-hmm.
place I was at, and people were a little bit, there was a little ripple, but nothing too much. But that could be open to abuse, right? Guys saying, "I
Yes.
identify as," and they don't, they're actually rapists and stuff. That can happen. But so, okay, instead of focusing on what can go wrong and this is not okay, let's see how we can make it safe for everybody. Let's have more bathrooms that, that people who do identify differently can go into.
Yeah.
How about
But
that?
yeah. But like from my perspective, because not only that, but I had a drinking buddy who was a trans male. And we were at a bar one time, and I went to go into the washroom, and he was there, and then had the shocked look, and I'm like, listen, I don't care. To me, it's like if you really do identify that way, there's no like the things that we worry about. Like if someone identifies as a trans woman and completely is a biological woman, especially considers themselves a heterosexual woman, then I'm not worried about them going into the bathroom because they're not going to go after women because
But
that's not what they want anyways.
that's when you know who that person is. When a
Yes, and
stranger
because I know
comes
who that person is,
when
and
a
then the
stranger
second,
comes in, you
yeah,
don't know.
you don't.
And
Yes,
so I can see all the sides on
mm-hmm.
that, right? I can see the person who
Oh,
really
me
needs
too.
to go pee right now. And I
Yeah,
can see the people who are in there who say,
mm,
you're not actually one of us, and this is not okay.
right.
And so arguing the rights and wrongs of that isn't really my focus in that
No,
I don't think we're going
mm,
to get an answer to that, but it's more, okay, I see this situation. Let's have more bathrooms. Let's have ones where people can go into there and, and they're safe to go in there as who they are.
mm.
So that could, what she said, could open up some solutions if people would stop
Yes,
yelling about everything and
that's
actually, you know, look at, well, where do we have a problem here? Let's fix it. I don't have an issue with people being trans, but at the same time, there's a point. It can be a problem. And, and that person who wanted to go for the women's swim team, come on. I don't think so. The whole Leah Thomas thing, like,
yeah.
no,
Eh,
no,
eh,
because biologically, that is a very different feature.
well,
No, you can't do that. That's
it,
just,
yeah.
nobody's going to deal with that. And that's not even a you can't be trans or you can be trans. It's just look at your physique and look
Mm.
at everybody else's physique.
Well,
And,
I'll
you
put it
know,
this way. This is my controversial but shouldn't be controversial statement.
go for it.
The division in sports isn't I wear makeup and have long hair and I don't. The distinction is my biology is one way and your biology is another. So the
Correct.
very fact that it even was allowed to get to that point was a misuse of language done intentionally to stir discord.
Absolutely. I agree with you. You get no controversy from me. I'm
Yeah.
100% with you on that. And I also noticed that even after the event, it kept getting posted again and again, and people kept reacting and reacting. And I'm like, this is A, old news, B, been dealt with, and
Yeah.
C, shouldn't have happened in the first place. But could we please look at the real issues? Because this whole distract and yell is stopping people from seeing what's actually happening and asking the questions that need to be asked. So, it's there's a lot of distraction going on and
Yeah.
focusing people's ire on J.K. Rowling because she said a thing that was then
Yeah.
deliberately misused is like, yeah, that's not the best thing you could have gotten out of that situation. The best thing you could have gotten out of that, in my opinion, is find a way to make sure everybody gets a bathroom. How about that?
Mm.
Everyone's got a place they can go and be safe. Now, I don't know, maybe a better solution than that could have come out of it. But to me, that's the one that lets everybody be who they are, which is what I'm all about, right? You want to
Well,
show
me
up
too.
wearing a wig, you show up wearing
Yeah.
a wig. You want
But
to, shave your eyebrows and
yeah.
have false boobs, like whatever you want to do. I don't care. It's your expression. The next thing is we start saying, well, you can't wear jeans or
Mm.
your t-shirt has to be red or,
Yeah.
what other nonsense are we going to go to? It's like, no, we don't have to do that.
Yeah. It's it my my also controversial, non-controversial topic is not so much trans men and women, but then all the gender fluid and all that other stuff is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be male and female.
Well,
Because, right? So in the era I grew up in, Gen X, the whole deal was you be a male the way you want to be, and you be a female the way you want to be. So now to be in a place where it's like, oh no, I'm not male because I don't like pickup trucks. It's like, so what's that got to do with anything? That's just a cultural thing that are attributed to males. But I know girls who like pickup trucks doesn't make them men. In fact, my older sister and one of my first cousins, who is also sometimes called my twin, both have very what we would consider masculine traits, but yet both consider themselves very feminine. So
sure.
it's
I mean,
like,
I think people are getting bogged down on this stuff. And again, what happens with that is focusing on the physical
Mm,
plane in a negative way to see
yeah.
what's wrong with it and what's wrong with the people around you and how they don't identify
Mm,
in the way that you have culturally been raised to assume they're going to identify
right.
is a distraction from the
Hmm.
real business of being here. Like you're here for a physical experience,
Mm,
yes, but you're not here to wallow in it. You're here to benefit and build from it. It's a very different approach. And, wherever you can identify an area where you could learn something, that's brilliant. That's great.
mhm.
That's something to go play with, go learn a
Yeah.
thing. And there's no the thing we get stuck on as well is judgment. Everybody's judging everybody else all the
Mm,
time. And you're wasting your time. It doesn't matter. Your judgment of this person or that person is immaterial to anybody else, right?
yeah.
Which is why there's all this yelling and nobody's listening
Yeah.
because nobody's actually saying anything worth listening to. There's just a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And, it's you don't have to care if I like a thing or I don't like a thing, for example.
Oh,
Doesn't matter. I could say, well, I don't like oranges. Oh, so you hate fruit, do you?
yeah.
Like, maybe I have an allergy, or maybe I had a bad experience with an orange that was rotten, or,
Mm,
by the way, I like oranges, but
yeah.
does it even matter? No, none of that actually matters. But the kind of argument that goes on these days is precisely that. Oh, you don't like oranges, so all fruit is bad, is it? You
Yeah.
know, you, you must be, and then you get inserted into a box,
Yeah.
and it's like, I didn't
Well,
say
and
any of
that's
that.
that's the part that gets me because again, it's discord sown on purpose,
Yeah.
not natural discord, because someone can have a difference of opinion on something and still be fine. Like, not an example, but or I'll go on this tangent until I get the other one back. But to use oranges as an example, oranges are good for human beings unless they kill you. Does that mean that person's not a human being because they don't have the one trait of eating oranges? Like, you know?
False
It,
logic can be made to say anything, right?
yeah.
And people do it all the time. And false equivalence,
Hmm.
that's the whole deal of you don't like oranges, therefore you don't like fruit. It's a false equivalence. It makes no sense whatsoever. And yet that is the main argument of choice these days. I see it all the
Yeah.
time. All
And
the
it drives me
time.
crazy.
It's
And again,
like
another reason for the podcast.
you look at to bring up the abortion thing again. Oh, you're pro-choice, therefore you love abortions, and it's like, ooh, I could be totally, not a fan of abortions, and what it means is I'm not going to have one.
Mm,
But pro-choice means I'm not telling you what you can do, right? I'm not presuming to know your business better than you do.
yeah.
So, but that false equivalence happens in a
Yeah.
heartbeat. Gun control. Oh, over my dead body, are you taking my
Mm,
gun away? Well, nobody said taking it away. They said controlling
mhm,
so that people who have access to them are, as sane as we can assume they
yeah.
are and less likely to go shooting up schools. Wouldn't that be a good thing? But,
Mm,
the false equivalency thing
yeah.
happens and people try and argue. Like I do my best when I hear a false equivalency, I do my best to just back off and leave it because there is no discussion to be had. This person is not coming from a place of logic. They're not being reasonable and they're not open to sort of discussion if they're using false equivalencies. They're just shutting you down. And so there's no point in spending your energy there. I
Yeah.
view my energy as being a very valuable currency, and I don't want to spend it on stuff that's just pointless.
You know what? I almost wonder, like, so
By the
again,
way, I
I
think this is
was
going to
taught
have to
by a
be two
trickster, right?
podcasts. This is going to have to be two podcast episode because we've been going a while now.
Yeah. Pretty much 2 hours at this point.
2.5.
2.5? Well, because we started talking, but
Oh
we
yeah.
talked for half an hour before
Okay.
jumping into recording. So it's two
Okay.
hours. Yeah. Then I'll end on this one. I wonder if it's not like, so I had a trickster teacher, right? So me too. My energy is valuable to me now because I've had a lot of it wasted. And so when someone asks me to do something, I'm always like, well, is this good use of my energy? And will it actually return my energy to me if I do it? Doesn't mean I won't do the thing, but it is something that always comes to my mind. So I always want to spend my energy on things that are going to be useful to me rather than not useful to me. And I wonder if it's not once you become aware of your energy and how your energy flows, that you don't become more uh, or your desire to now have your energy being spent properly because you know how much it can be wasted. I wonder if it's not common throughout this actual our particular corner of the world
I would
as far as that
imagine
goes.
so. I mean, you can't be aware of how valuable your energy
Mm,
is and then not care about where you throw it.
right.
It wouldn't make sense. So when people are talking about, who's awake and who
Mm,
isn't and all this kind of stuff, first of all, it's not your business to wake anybody
that's
up.
right.
They'll either wake or they won't. And there's different definitions of what that looks like.
Hmm.
So, again, I leave that to the individual.
Hmm.
But sort of yeah, the whole if you know that your energy is valuable and you understand that you have a
Hmm.
finite amount and that you have options. This is a thing I think a lot of people miss is you have options as to whether you respond to that or react to that or not.
Hmm.
And taking that power back and saying, I'm not going to engage over here because this really isn't a good use of my energy is a really valuable way to look at things because you can then use it for something else that you are going to feel a return on. And let's face it, human beings do not do things that they don't think they're going to benefit from.
Right.
That's not how we wouldn't survive very long if that was how we were wired.
You wouldn't.
So there's nothing wrong in that. In fact, it's a very natural instinct. So it's kind of a requirement, right? And none of us do things that we think we're going to hate either.
That's right. You know what? As
What?
you say, we've
Fingers
been
coming up, so it's a thing.
yeah. I think an episode on love, we would be use the word remiss in not making the statement that taking back your power is one, the truest form of self-love,
Yes,
but it then enables you once you've taken back your power, you can then love people more.
yes. I'm gonna 100% go with that because how can you can't show up with love if you're
Mm-hmm.
disempowered because you've been giving your energy everywhere else. And it's just like when people don't have self-love, you're not coming from any solid foundation in which you might be giving to people, but is it love? It can't be really if you don't have any.
That's
And
right.
kind of self-love, we get screwed up in childhood a lot over this. You sort of put yourself last, and there's a lot of that. Oh, I sacrifice myself for my children. It's like, oh, no, you don't. You don't. You make choices based on being a
Mm-hmm.
parent and with the best decision-making tools you have at your disposal. That is not the same thing. And if you think you're making a sacrifice, then I can tell you children aren't very thrilled about that because they get to hear it. And that
That's
never
right.
feels good. So nobody benefits from that one either. It's like, yeah, that awareness of the value of yourself on this planet as a human being, and then coming from a place of, well, I am worthwhile, and so now I'm going to look at you as somebody who's worthwhile, and I'm going to respond accordingly. You can't do that if you're coming from a place of self-flagellation. It just doesn't work. So that's my contribution. But your controversial statements haven't been controversial as far as I'm concerned.
No,
I'm
I
bang on.
know. That's why I said non-controversial, non-controversial topic because it's not. But I do like leaving it this on the note of taking back your power to show as a sign of love for yourself, and therefore, and then to follow up with it as an ability to now show love to others. I think it's a good way to end a episode on love.
Yep.
Even if we did vary from place to place, this is a good ending for it. And just to do the reminder of, so once again, the assignment is for me.
Yep.
So you guys can just listen and see what it's like. When I post this episode, I'm not going to give an assignment. I'm just going to post what I learned from the assignment instead. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it because I'm not given anything else to go on. So once again, I'm Daniel Dubois.
And I'm Michaela Stone.
And until next time.
Until next time.